Afternoon. We are going to get started. Everybody ready? Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Revenue and Financing Subcommittee meeting for the Department of Transportation Modernization AdHoc Committee. It's a mouthful. Welcome. I want to take a minute before we get started to let our subcommittee members introduce themselves. We'll start over here with you, Mr. Smith. Please introduce yourself and the district that you represent, and we'll subcommittee members, and then we'll welcome and recognize the full committee members.
Thank you very much. Mark Smith, House District 99, Berkeley County.
Philip Bowers, Pickens County, represent the Clemson Central 6 Mile area. Glad to be here.
Lonnie Hosey, I represent District 91, Allendale, Barnwell, and parts of Orangeburg.
Stephen Long, District 37 in Spartanburg.
Good afternoon. Heath Sessions, House District 46 in Rock Hill, York County.
Thank you. Those are our subcommittee members, but we have several full committee members here that, well, I'll get in a second. Go. I'm start with you, Mr. Brewer.
Thank you very much. Gary Brewer, House District 114, Charleston and Dorchester counties.
Robbie Robbins, House District 97, Dorchester and Colleton.
Good afternoon, Don Chapman, House District 8, Anderson County.
Good afternoon, David Vaughn, District 27, Greenville County.
And I am Heather Crawford, represent District 68, Southern Myrtle Beach, Greater Socastee area. And I have not forgotten about you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Shannon Erickson, House District 124, Beaufort.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for your continued work. This is a very, very important component to what we have been working on. And several of you have been here for all three of the subcommittee meetings. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time. And this is the part of the puzzle that is going to bring everything together. We have been working for months to identify issues, problems, solutions, things we do good that we can do better. And so this is the funding aspect. We've got a couple of folks here today, so we're going to go ahead and get started into our agenda. And we have two presentations, and then we will open it up for questions from our members. And then after the presentations, we will have just open discussion, specific questions, ideas, language, anything like that that you guys have. So, you have something?
Yes.
Go ahead.
We don't have Dr. Dennis.
Okay, so our first guest that we're going to ask to come up, we have Dr. Von Nessen. For our members, we do not have this in your book, but it will be on the screen, and we will get you the presentation. So it's going to be on your tablet and on the screen for the audience, and then we'll get you the presentation and all the information. Dr. Von Nessen, thank you so much for being here. Please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Sounds great. Well, thank you all very much. Good afternoon. My name is Joey Von Nessen. I'm a research economist at the Darla Moore School of Business here at USC. And we practice applied economic research in our division of research. And I'm going to be sharing with you over the next few minutes this study that we initially rolled out this past June, looking at the economic impact of infrastructure investments in South Carolina. And before we get started, I want to be very respectful of everyone's time this afternoon. I know there's a lot on the agenda, so we're just going to go over the results at a very high level. But if you have questions either now or later, please feel free to reach out anytime. Happy to go through the details with you. So this study, when we look at the impact of infrastructure investments in South Carolina, and we do a lot of back and forth on the data and go through a number of different sets of results, the bottom line that emerges from all the results that we look at and the estimates that we establish is that infrastructure, it's very simple. Infrastructure represents a primary foundation of all economic growth. This is true in South Carolina. This is true in every region. But because South Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country, infrastructure is becoming even more critical as we move forward. to ensuring that we remain economically competitive. So a very simple but important bottom line that emerges from the findings of this research. And we can see this very easily in the data. And so I want to go through the results in terms of looking at the economic impact of infrastructure investments, but also how we can see this growing demand in South Carolina. And there are three primary ways that we can observe this. First, as you see, the percentage of job creation in South Carolina in the metropolitan regions is increasing. We're seeing more concentration of employment growth in South Carolina. Population growth is also very high, one of the fastest rates in the U.S. in South Carolina, which we'll come back and talk a bit about. And then thirdly, the industries that are primarily responsible for our economic growth disproportionately rely on transportation infrastructure. So all three of these are driving the demand for infrastructure in South Carolina, and they're all interrelated, but represent ways to think about the priorities of infrastructure investment in slightly different ways. So we'll go through each one of these briefly. First, looking at the increasing concentration of employment growth in South Carolina. And this is, again, very easy to see. These are not subtle patterns. In South Carolina, over the last decade, since 2015, what we find is that the vast majority of employment growth is taking place in just 12 counties. About 85% of total job gains over the last decade occurring to just 12 counties in South Carolina, which here you can see are highlighted in pink. And that just represents this increased concentration that we are currently seeing, and also suggests types of infrastructure investments that are presented as opportunities. Given that we are looking to connect South Carolinians overall to these job gains, this looks at priorities that could include transportation infrastructure in terms of moving the population or providing them access to these opportunities via investments in transportation infrastructure, but also broadband. When we look at connecting the population to these employment opportunities, again, either physically or virtually. So we can see how infrastructure investments can be tailored to or considered in light of the increasing employment concentration that we're seeing throughout the state. And this is also a heat map that highlights the commute patterns in South Carolina as well. So you can see which areas of the state where commute times tend to be larger, and again, how that positions against the employment concentration in terms of the distribution throughout South Carolina. Secondly, we can look at population growth in South Carolina as a whole. As I mentioned, we're one of the fastest growing states in the country. We were number 4 in 2024. We were number 1 in 2023, number 1 in the country. And we've been consistently in the top 5 for population growth throughout the 2020s. But we also see population growth. It's not evenly distributed across South Carolina. And here you can just see a summary of where the highest population growth has been taking place. So the top 5 counties since 2020, Jasper, Horry, Lancaster, Edgefield, and Berkeley counties. And we've seen some changes in this distribution over the past 10 to 15 years as well. One example I like to use is that Berkeley County, which you can see now is in the top 5, used to be Charleston County in the previous decade, in the 2010s. And this reflects picking on Charleston for a moment, as Charleston continues to expand outwards. And so we've seen Berkeley County increase in terms of its rate of population growth, and Charleston has receded a bit in terms of ranking relative to the top 5 and the top 10 in the state. And then finally, we also want to look at the industries that are driving growth in South Carolina. And it turns out that those are disproportionately relying on transportation infrastructure. And these two industries have been consistently advanced manufacturing and logistics. Advanced manufacturing, as we all know, being an informal term that we generally use for the automotive, the aerospace, and the tire sectors, not just the manufacturers, but also their supply chains that are located throughout South Carolina. And then the logistics industry, referring to everything from transportation to distribution to warehousing. All right, so a broad-based sector, a broad-based cluster as well. And these two have been driving our growth, looking backwards and as we look forwards. Again, if we look at the data, these are not subtle patterns. We see this in advanced manufacturing. If we look at total employment growth going back to 2010, in South Carolina, advanced manufacturing has more than doubled in terms of its total size. And it's been number 1 in terms of overall growth in the Southeast as a whole. Again, this reflects growth going all the way back to 2010. And we see this also when we look at logistics. And logistics especially is important to consider going forward, because while advanced manufacturing has been really the key driver over the previous 10 to 15 years, logistics has been right there at the top of the list as well. And logistics is expanding in terms of its importance going forward, largely because of this population growth that we're seeing, not just in South Carolina, but throughout the Southeast. And as you see here, the region labeled as the South Atlantic, poised to grow faster than any other region of the U.S. over the next several decades. And so that means that we're going to see an increasing customer base in the Southeast and an increasing percentage of the population being located in this region that companies are going to want to have access to. So when we think about logistics-based businesses, or we think about manufacturers, South Carolina and the Southeast more generally becomes an ideal region to locate. If you're a manufacturer looking to make your product in South Carolina and to distribute it to the Southeast to an increasing customer base, this is an ideal location. And if you're importing goods and distributing them to customers throughout the Southeast, again, this is a very good location. So because of this strong population growth, this represents more potential growth for advanced manufacturing and for logistics as we move forward. So with that in mind then, in terms of the background for why we are seeing so much of an increase in growth, an increase in demand, what is the actual impact of infrastructure investments that we are seeing in South Carolina? What does that look like during the 2020s? And there are two types of impacts that we assess in this study, short-run and long-run impacts, as you can see. The short-run effects are the ones that we think about more generally when we're considering specific construction projects. So whether it's roads or bridges or wastewater treatment facilities, but the actual investments themselves in terms of the construction activity and the building activities, these are temporary one-time effects that take place in the local regions where the investments occur. And these are sometimes multi-year effects, but regardless, these are short-run effects that we want to establish. So the impacts of the project construction itself. But secondly, we also want to look at these long-run effects, the long-term impacts, and these are ones that result from productivity gains and from increases to long-run economic growth as we maintain or improve the economic competitiveness of South Carolina. So we want to look at both of these, both the short-run impacts and the long-run impacts. Both are very important. In terms of short-run impacts, we can look at the types of spending that we see in terms of what that looks like. So overall, again, we won't spend much time going through the specific numbers, but just to give you a feel for what this looks like in terms of the dollars that are being spent, construction dollars versus planning dollars, broadband deployment, and other costs. So you can see a general sense of what the distribution looks like by category over the fiscal years 2021 through 2027. And when we capture these economic impacts, we are, in this study, in this iteration of the study, looking at 4 specific partner agencies: the Department of Transportation, Rural Infrastructure Authority, Department of Environmental Services, and Office of Regulatory Staff. These are the impacts that we are specifically capturing. And in sum, when we look at these short-run impacts, again, construction-related effects, we see that the total impact of projected, current and future projected investments between fiscal years 2021 and 2027 to total about $56.2 billion over this 7-year period. And this translates into, as you can see, about $18 billion in labor income for South Carolinians and about 45,000 jobs annual, the average annual number of jobs created over that 7-year period. And the peak, based on current projections in fiscal year 2024, but you can see the relative distribution over the 7-year period. But again, a sizable economic impact resulting from these investments of around the totaling about $56 billion. And to put this in context, we can look at a number of different ways to establish the how these effects have practical implications for South Carolinians in a number of ways. One way to see this is to look at the effects of these job creation figures that we see. Again, an average of 45,000 jobs created annually over the 7-year period. And these are jobs that are high quality in terms of the wages that we see that are paid on average about a 10% wage premium compared to the average job in South Carolina as a whole. Secondly, we can look at the long-run impacts as well. So these are short-run effects that are construction-based, and then the long-run impacts that refer more to the potential for increases in long-run economic growth and productivity gains. And here we're specifically looking at and trying to gauge how South Carolina's economic competitiveness can be maintained or improved over time. So to capture these long-run effects, what we did was to look back over the past decade and look at investments that were made by companies outside of the state and look at what those impacts were in South Carolina. And then we look back over 10 years and we say, if we were to see that level of investment going forward over the next decade, what would that generate in terms of new economic activity for South Carolina? And if we put it in a different way, what will we be leaving on the table if those types of investments were to slow, if we weren't to see that same pace of investment from outside South Carolina over the next decade in the way that we have over the previous decade? So doing that extrapolation and looking at those investments and what those impacts are likely to be going forward, basically we're talking about 157,000 jobs likely to be created over the next decade as a result of these investments coming in from out of state. And these are gains that are largely realized because of the infrastructure maintenance, modernization, and expansion that we regularly engage in, making sure that South Carolina remains economically competitive for companies looking to locate in this region of the country for the reasons that we've already outlined. And so, again, looking at it from the opposite perspective, these are 157,000 jobs for South Carolina that we could be leaving on the table, economic opportunity we could be leaving on the table, which could lead to $16 billion, again, in labor income that we either capitalize on or realize or leave on the table, again, largely based on whether we remain competitive with respect to infrastructure in terms of maintenance, in terms of improvement and modernization and expansion, given our significant growth that we're seeing as we move forward. So wrapping up, we finish up right where we started with the bottom line that is very clear when we look at the data that infrastructure does represent a primary foundation for all economic growth. And again, that's especially true in South Carolina, where we're seeing more growth as one of the fastest states in the country. And infrastructure is becoming, as a result, more critical to ensuring that the Palmetto State remains economically competitive. So I will stop there. Thank you all very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Von Nessen. That certainly is very good information and very important data for us to consider as we prepare for the future and plan. We will open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Von Nessen? You did such a great job, such a detailed presentation.
Hopefully very.
You have them speechless.
Hopefully clear, but I'll be happy to take questions later as well. Yes.
Thank you so much. And we certainly appreciate you being here today and for helping with this. Yeah, if you want to hang around, if we have any questions, certainly we will take those later. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate you. Thank you. All right, great. And next we have someone everyone is very familiar with, Secretary Powell. You're up. And while Lauren's getting you set up, let me just say again, I want to say thank you to the Secretary and to his team at DOT. They have followed us all over the state. They have been here every step of the way, being very transparent and accessible and providing all kinds of detailed information for us. So thank you, Mr. Secretary, and your team again for all of the work that you guys have helped us with over the last several months as we've traveled around the state. The Secretary has a brief presentation, and then we will take questions. With that, welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I think the staff member said this was the 70,000th meeting, so 70,000th and first meeting of testimony here. So what I have before y'all today, will echo a lot of what Mr. Rainwater shared with the committee, the full committee yesterday, but I wanted to go in a little bit more depth about a couple of the major trends impacting us. Again, it'll be very similar and echo a lot of things that Mr. Rainwater said. So we'll kind of give a high level on how our budget operates, our revenue sources, where it goes, and then some of the challenges that we are confronting. So kind of the bottom line up front is that DOT, we rely upon a mix of federal and state funds to drive our program. We are about 60% state funded on any given base year, about 40% federally funded. Each one of them comes with their own restrictions and allowed uses, and I'll go into a little bit about it. We apply our funds in a way that tries to maximize the best possible use of that. So we look at the strings and the attachment, particularly with our federal dollars, to program it to the best programs where it makes the most sense to. And then, as I talked with the Future Issues Committee, we kind of use a planning continuum to drive how we get from basically plan to project and eventually to maintenance from there. So, as I mentioned earlier, DOT is 60% state funded, 40% federally funded. It does not mean that all the federal funds go to the upstate. It was just how this graph was illustrated here. But our federal funds, and I'll talk a little bit about it here, but our state funds really come from four key sources here: the gas tax, car sales taxes, DMV fees, and then general fund appropriations. And I'll walk through each one of those individually just for some context where it came from. So our big four of our revenues really comes into the gas tax, which is our single largest source of state revenue. It's about $1 billion all told that comes into the Department of Transportation. Our second biggest one is the car sales tax. Yesterday, Mr. Rainwater called it the infrastructure maintenance fee, which is actually what its formal title is in code, but it is the $500 that you pay when you buy a car from a car dealership. That's the cap. Based on that, that was converted into a fee back in 2017. We do get a portion, but not all of DMV's licenses and registrations. So we get most of the driver's licenses that are collected within the state. We get $16 of the $41 that are paid on registrations in the state, and then we get the hybrid and electric fees, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then starting in fiscal 23, we did start getting a recurring general fund appropriation, as well as the one-time dollars that come into us. That general fund appropriation in fiscal 23 was to match the increase in federal funds that we got from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the big infrastructure bill that passed in 2021. So just kind of talking through how the gas tax works in a little more detail on that. I thought it would be good to compare us to our neighbors in states that have economies and local circumstances very similar to us. South Carolina in the region has the lowest gas tax rate at 28.75 cents. You can see our neighbors, if you go on the eastern seaboard, range anywhere from 32 cents in Georgia up to 41.5 cents up in Virginia. I think the other thing that's important, and Mr. Rainwater talked about it a little bit yesterday, is unlike our neighbors, we do not have an automatic adjustment or an index for when we have an increase in inflation or population. All of our neighbors do it slightly differently, but you can see that Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia all do indexes on the gas tax there to account for the increase in fuel economy, the increase in inflation that will erode the buying power of the gas tax penny. So this is a variation of a chart that we hand out during the budget season. We changed up the look on it a little bit, but I think one of the most important things to note is that while the gas tax is at 28.75 cents, the gas tax does not go in its entirety to the Department of Transportation. So 6 cents of the gas tax goes to other entities that are required to get a share of it. So that's the 3.99 cents that goes to the CTCs. We get a penny is required by us to go towards the state infrastructure bank. And then there are smaller amounts that go to DHEC, or now it's DES, DNR's watercraft fund, tax credits. So there's a part of that that goes off the top from there. 10 cents, an equivalent of 10 cents is basically set aside into the infrastructure, the new gas tax trust fund, infrastructure maintenance trust fund. That was the increase in gas taxes that occurred in 2017 and beyond. Those are basically segregated and only dedicated to maintenance and repair projects across the state on the existing state highway system. Another 10 cents really goes to our field maintenance personnel across the state in terms of maintaining our salaries and our benefits for our employees. And then 184 million, as I talked about in the last committee meeting, goes to 184 in that. 2 cents goes to matching federal funds, and then just less than a penny goes to other projects and programs. So I wanted to kind of share with y'all that while we talk about a 28.75 cent gas tax, it gets sliced and diced by law into a bunch of different buckets and ways going forward. Our other major source of funding for the department after the gas tax is federal aid that we get from the U.S. Department of Transportation. We get on average in a given year about $1 billion in federal aid that comes in. Now, it comes in a variety of buckets with a variety of strings attached to them. There is a required match. It's typically 20% there. Sometimes we can get by on a 10% match on our projects. Generally has the most strings and restrictions. It requires the most environmental review. It requires the most kind of process through our federal partners. Then they provide their review on that. I think what's one thing is important here is that these get reauthorized every 5 years. So at the end of next year, the big infrastructure bill that was passed back in the Biden administration will be up for renewal. I think it's important to note we've been active with other state DOTs on this issue, but it is very clear that what we are hearing out of Capitol Hill is that it is unlikely that the federal program will grow from where we are getting at that $1 billion we're getting today, and may very well come down. And so although we don't know exactly how it's all going to shake out, we have not seen legislative text, we are not counting on the same rate of growth that we saw back in 2021, and we are potentially bracing for a cut to our federal funds as a result. So in total, our budget is, our estimated base budget is just over $2.7 billion, and you can see that split between federal and state. We do get a small amount of what we call partner projects. Those are sales tax programs or other types of, when we do projects for other state agencies, when we get contributions in from them as well. In terms of our expenditures, balanced budget at $2.7 billion there. And as I've kind of shared with the group, the half of our money goes into maintenance and system preservation. So that's our paving budget, that's our maintenance budget, that's our bridge budget. Capacity and operational improvements, that is our interstate program is the bulk of that. The funding for NPOs and council of governments, the $238 million that goes to them, and then just over $100 million goes into our safety program. That makes up that piece. What's important to note is our overall other expenditures, other operations are just 13% of our budget. So at the end of the day, almost all the money that comes into the department is not spent on overhead. It goes back on the road. I think what's one thing that's not on here is that there is no debt service for the department. The department became debt-free in fiscal year 2023. We paid off a series of outstanding general obligation bonds and loans to the state infrastructure bank. So a question of kind of how we get, and I brought this up with the Future Needs Subcommittee, so for some of y'all have already heard this, but we rely on a cascade of planning documents that ultimately lead to a decision to put money onto the ground. So our 10-year asset management plan, our stamp, really sets our investment levels and the targets and the performance that we want to do. That leads into our 10-year plan, which says, we're going to put $700 million into pavements, $450 million into interstates. Once we take those funding levels, We program projects into the statewide transportation improvement program based on priority lists that have been approved by our commission. And we program our projects within our fiscal constraint there. And then the budget that y'all approve is really the total anticipated expenditure and program spend that occurs in a given year. So it kind of feeds to kind of from a multi-year plan down to a single year plan that you see in your state budget requests that we give every year. As we talked about our 10-year plan, I think y'all have seen me give this presentation. I'll be giving slightly updated numbers to the commission with updates there, but we've been hitting our goals and targets there of 1,200 miles from rural road safety, over 10,000, now will be over 10,000 miles in the next report, over 400 bridges and 121 miles of interstate projects. So we work hard on being performance-based, that investments brought into the department, money brought in, leads to tangible return out, so that the taxpayer knows what they are getting as a result of what we are been programming. I talked a lot with the Future Needs Subcommittee this morning about our Momentum 2050 plan. This is our long-range plan that establishes where the department needs to go over a 25-year horizon. One of the requirements that we are required to do on that is to put a 10-year gap. This plan was really crafted with a focus on the state's growth that we are seeing, the acceleration of the state's population growth that Mr. Rainwater talked about, that population growth that's leading to more cars on the road, more traffic, more congestion. And so there's 4 key areas. I won't belabor them too much. You've heard me talk about them. We've got to maintain where we are in terms of catching up on deferred maintenance. We have to continue to invest in our interstates, to move freight from both our advanced manufacturing that Dr. Van Nessen talked about, the ports expansion, as well as just the population growth. We've got to deal with this urban-rural split that we see, and Dr. Frank Rainwater talked about this yesterday, of the split in population that we're seeing in the state between high growth in our urban areas and low or no growth in our rural areas, and then continuing to better partner with our multimodal partners, whether it's in rail, airports, and our Port Authority. So some of our challenges that we come from a fiscal perspective, I think this one, y'all have seen this slide before, and no real shock here, and I've got a couple different numbers way of looking at it, but starting in late 2021 and really through 2024 or so, we saw a pretty significant spike in inflation that was occurring nationwide on a variety of things. Just like you were at the grocery store, saw your grocery bill going up, that same thing happened on construction. We like to encapsulate this, that 1 penny of the gas tax could buy 114 miles 2-lane paving back when the 10-year plan was adopted. Last year, that went down to 87 miles. So living within our budget means that we are now pushing out fewer projects as a result of the price of projects now. To put it into another way of looking at it, Mr. Rainwater talked yesterday about the Highway Construction Cost Index. It's a inflation indicator done by the Federal Highway Administration, and you can see that spike that occurred in 21, 22, 23, 24 was about a 65% increase that occurred. But if you look at the original gas tax, that original 16 cents that really maintains the core of our maintenance and our operations for the department, that has remained flat. So what you're looking at is basically escalating prices with a flat revenue stream, and you can see that in many of our other revenue categories that our revenue streams have not kept up with the inflation we've seen. So some of the other challenges that we have, and I've talked about this with the committee, we have a disparity in the state between internal combustion vehicles or gasoline vehicles. When you count, everybody drives differently, but on average, a South Carolinian drives pays about $200 per year in gas tax if they drive a gasoline vehicle. If you have an electric vehicle, you obviously don't pay the gas tax because you're not fueling on gallons of gasoline. You pay a $120 fee every 2 years, or roughly $60 into the system. So there is a pretty significant disparity between the two, and as people adopt more electric vehicles, you'll see that disparity show up in our revenues in terms of diminishing gas tax revenues without the electric vehicles catching up from there. Just to put it into context where we are relative to the southeastern states, you can see North Carolina, Georgia, West Virginia, Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, all well positioned above at that $200 number, similar to what we have in South Carolina. Tennessee's actually is programmed in their statute to go up to $274 in a few years from there, but you can see that we are, compared to our southeastern neighbors, certainly the lowest when it comes to electric vehicle fees on an annual basis across the country. The other major challenge, and I talked a lot about this with the Future Needs Subcommittee this morning, is that we have as part of the Momentum 2050 plan, we were required to develop a gap analysis of, we were going to try to achieve that vision, what kind of dollars in 2024 dollars would we need to have. And we produced a gap analysis, and it identified some areas where if additional funding were provided for us to achieve the vision of that plan, where we would need to focus. And so it would be focused on obviously bridges, interstates, all areas that you've heard me talk about, regional mobility, safety, working on congestion programs, whether it's in our strategic rural corridors or in our trying to put the ITMS TSMO or trying to move more throughput through. So you can kind of see where we've identified that we have gaps and where we would invest from there. It's not to say we need all of that money all at once, but it's one of those things that if there's a desire to achieve the plan and to start trying to tackle the congestion and the growth that we're seeing across the state, as well as making sure that we don't leave rural South Carolina behind, this is something that we'll have to take a look at going from there. So looking at options and alternatives that are available to this committee, and again, these are policy decisions of the General Assembly and just things that we can put on the table. And Mr. Rainwater, I think, did well on explaining several of them. And I'll just kind of walk around the wheel here. But first would be looking at tolls and choice lanes. So this would not necessarily work in every corner of South Carolina. It's most likely viable in the Charleston area, the Charlotte suburbs, and in the Greenville-Spartanburg area. But that is an alternative available to us that could lower the state's capital contribution into some of those very large interstate projects that we have on the horizon in those areas. You could look at adjusting DMV fees. That could be looking at the registration fees that are paid in. You could look at adjusting what is officially known in the code as the safety maintenance fee. That is the $250 additional registration fees that new residents pay. I've heard in the other chamber folks call it the Yankee tax, but that is the official term is the safety maintenance fee. You could look at that as an alternative, particularly with the incoming growth. Electric vehicle fees are in that category as well. The other piece that I would throw out there is that the DMV does collect the car sales tax. We have a cap in South Carolina on that transaction. That is something that you could look at. Mr. Rainwater kind of shared those numbers at the last meeting about looking at that in terms of car sales from there. We've talked about indexing the gas tax, having adjustments for fuel economy, for population growth, for inflation, something out there. We can provide suggestions on that. The allocation of automotive-related revenue. So there are general fund revenue streams that go into the general fund that have are derived from automotive and transportation uses. I'm thinking insurance taxes on your car insurance that gets paid into the state. Our friends in North Carolina allocate a portion of the sales tax based on an estimate of the collection on going to Advance Auto Parts or to getting a car repair oil change from there, having that going into the highway fund. The last category I will put out there that we've discussed, and again would be something new and unique to South Carolina, would be we have seen a tremendous rate of growth in South Carolina that are being caused by people moving in from outside the state. So the growth that we're feeling, the pain pressure we're feeling, is often not for folks that may have lived their entire lives in South Carolina, but are resulting from folks moving in. What this concept would be is basically a congestion mitigation fee that would be paid in for each incremental new house that would be built in the state, that could be paid to help address congestion-related issues across the state. So not advocating, but just giving you some options that are potentially on the table for the committee to consider if there's a desire to put additional money in. That, Madam Chairs, I will wrap up and be ready for another round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I know we've had a lot of questions about bridges, and we've had some discussion on that. But just as kind of a refresher, can you just kind of talk about what we've done to address and expedite the bridge program over the last couple of years and the funding we've put there, just so everybody's kind of up to speed and knows about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been, on bridges in particular, so we program about 239 years out of our federal and existing state funds. We've been very clear that we have a significant bridge challenge, particularly in the upstate across South Carolina. And so we have asked for bridge funding of $200 million per year in the budget in fiscal year 25. That money has all been programmed. So that has all been put onto design or construction of projects. So it is not laid idle. It is being put to use right now. This past year, there was another $200 million non-recurring appropriation. We have already gone and updated our priority list. We have our pipeline ready to go. The budget, the non-recurring money is not going to be released in the budget until February 28th this year, but once we get access to it, we will immediately start programming it from there. But we've received other one-time sources from the General Assembly. A couple of years ago, there was funding for rural road safety that we were able to increase our funding, and then there had been funding for interstates, and that's really how we've been able to accelerate the widening of 26 and 95 was because of the American Rescue Plan Act allocation as well as some one-time money. So just as a preview, what I've already submitted to EBO is $300 million for bridges in the coming year. And there may be some additional news on that coming soon.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Questions for the Secretary? Man, y'all are a lively bunch this afternoon. Representative Long, right.
Thank you so much for coming again today. So I was trying to look at the chart. It looks like there's like $1 billion of annual needs that you're looking at. And we went to Florida this summer, and I went through one of the tolls there. I don't think you can go anywhere in Florida without hitting a toll. Can you tell us a little about how that would be, somewhat new to a lot of people in South Carolina? How would tolling work and function? Is that talking about like existing roads? Is that talking about, new added lanes or added growth? Like, how would you see tolls working for South Carolina?
So we have a toll statute that is in effect. Of recent history, there have only been 2 toll roads in South Carolina. Down in Hilton Head, there was a toll road kind of to get you over to the Sea Pines area. By law, we have to lift the toll once the bonds are paid off on that. So back in 2021, we did that. There is a private concession that operates a toll road in the Greenville area, or under the kind of as a connection between Simpsonville to Powdersville area, and then it's kind of a bypass to Greenville. That has not been as successful as it's been done in the past. So I think, and we can provide language to the committee. There is a definite need. Our toll statutes are old. They were written in the 50s. There was some updates in the 90s. If we really want to do tolling in South Carolina, we're going to have to update those statutes accordingly. I think where we have an opportunity with tolling is less about new alignment type projects where you're building a new road and it's tolled, but looking at like what has occurred in Charlotte, north of uptown Charlotte, or if you've been in Metro Atlanta, where you have added capacity, where you're basically being able to buy your way out of congestion. So that would be, which is not allowed currently in statute, would be, I think, an opportunity for us because you get the benefit if you choose to purchase your way into that choice lane. You see, the benefit of basically a free flow of traffic there. But for every person that buys their way out, that means there's one less person in the lane. So there's usually a benefit for the general purpose traffic as well, even if they do not choose to use that as well.
Thank you for sharing that. For Charlotte and Atlanta, when they did those express lanes, was that new lanes that were added, or did they take existing lanes and then all of a sudden put a toll on them?
So federal law prohibits us from taking an existing lane and turning it into a toll lane. So it would be in South Carolina, would be a brand new lane added that would have that capacity. The only variation, I'll just kind of share it, is in Charlotte and in Atlanta, they converted old HOV lanes, high occupancy vehicle lanes, where it was like 3 people in the car could go in there, but if you were just a single occupants driver, you weren't allowed in there. They did convert those into toll lanes, but by and large, an existing lane today would remain free. It'd be a new additional lane as a result.
Representative Smith?
Trying to find a slide from that you also were able to see. Secretary talked about, it was a picture with the country, and it talked about the Southeast growth.
That might be in...
it was not yours. It was the previous. Here we are. Projected population growth by U.S. region 2024 by Dr. Von Nessen. Previously, basically, it pointed to the area, and you know this, South Atlantic, plus 10 million people. We talked about the significant number of growth that's happening here in South Carolina. I guess I wanted to just kind of step away and just kind of poke a couple holes in a different area for you to benefit from your wisdom from the philosophy of growth paying for growth. You gave us, and I see this, and I heard you, here's plenty of ways to raise money, raise taxes and fees on our taxpayers. But from a growth paying for growth concept, through the kaleidoscope that you look through, just to lean into that and push you a little bit here today, what could that look like that we haven't talked about?
So what I would say, looking at growth paying for growth, so I think let me back up and say there's a policy challenge we have in the state, and it's not a new one. When we have an encroachment permit come in, what we basically say is if the road can handle you, you can add the homes. It's the last guy in that gets the, said, oh, well, you got to do the traffic light here. You got to do all of these other improvements. So there's definitely a policy challenge from that perspective for us. So I think if you're looking at options for quote unquote growth paying for growth, I'd say choice lanes gives you that market driven approach by being able to say, buy your way out of congestion. You were this added increase is being paid for there. The safety maintenance fee is at $250. It's a one-time payment, but it's every time you make a new registration in South Carolina. So every person moving in from New York, New Jersey, Ohio would be subject to that and could pay into the system from there. So I guess I would say is, while it's on the books, you certainly could look at that as something that could bring in additional revenue. I think it brings in about $20 million per year right now on the $250 fee. One concept we've bounced around, and I would say it probably needs discussion, is the notion of local governments can charge what are called impact fees. Is having something that could be done that could help deal with that policy problem of the last guy in getting stuck with the bill, where you could spread the cost of that and generate from there. We think kind of conceptually we would be a fee that could be charged. It would stay within the county that it occurred, and that would be used by DOT to pay for congestion improvements, retiming signals, doing intersection improvements, adding turn lanes. Again, not maybe doing full-scale widenings, because those can get very expensive very quickly, but could be a way to help alleviate the pain by those that are causing that issue. Because I would say when we have an encroachment permit and we tell first 3 developers, if we say the road can handle 1,000 more homes on it, the first 3 developers put in 990 homes on it. They've done their turn lanes, whatever they need to do. But the guy that might be putting in a 50-home subdivision is told that, hey, you're breaking the intersection now. They often, somewhat rightly, complain about that it's not fair to them, that they didn't necessarily cause it, but we take the posture, you're the one that's the tipping point at that point. But we know there's been a lot more contribution from there. So we would be the first or among the first states to ever consider anything like that. But it is something I think that given our growth rate might be something that we need to put on the table.
Thank you. And completely shifting gears, going to a staffing level from an HR perspective. We know that as we run our businesses, when there's turnover in staff, that costs us money with onboarding and training, which then can cause delays in projects and permitting things happening. I know that's not part of this primary presentation, Madam Chair, ladies, but from a macro perspective in terms of impacting costs and timelines, what area, is there a turnover, losing of a certain segment of your employees that is of concern to you, that other industries and professions are stealing, poaching some of those employees, and that is a turnover rate that's maybe caused by salary caps and requirements that your hands are tied on? If there's any of those areas that you want to just maybe educate us on that may impact this as well.
Yeah, no, we went through a pretty robust, so we had a fairly high vacancy rate, and Co-Chair Erickson was part of this back when she was chairing our TNR subcommittee back at the time, but we had a fairly high vacancy rate, 21, 22. Part of that was just coming out of the pandemic and the labor challenges, but when I came to the department in 2019, our entry level was $11 an hour. And we were able to move it up to 14 a few years later. Working with Co-Chair Erickson and Emma, what we did was we took those positions that were being budgeted but never being filled. What we did was we actually did an optimization of our headcount to where we were, and we were able to increase our maintenance entry level, which is basically, if you want to work for the DOT, if you have as a maintenance entry level, it's a 10th grade education and a clean drug screen. That was we moved that up to $20 an hour as a result. We have done other reviews internally of our comp structure from there. One of the things that we've just gone through, and I would say I would characterize as we're digesting it right now, is that the state, so we're in the state pay scale with everybody else. They just pivoted from a pretty major change on the pay scale from where we are. So we're still adjusting and slotting into where we are. I would say the last time I looked at it, we were at about an 87% vacancy or occupancy factor for our workforce statewide. We budget to 90%, that we recognize that that people retire, they have life circumstances change. So we're right at that number. We do have challenges with, certain counties in the state. A Beaufort County is a difficult place for us to hire in, and it's not necessarily because of the workforce. The people who are moving there are generally senior citizens that are looking to retire, not necessarily looking to work on the back of a backhoe. And so those challenges we know in certain pockets in there, but when we look at it statewide, we're at about 87%. And I think it's important that, oftentimes we do a lot to shift employees across the state. So when there was snow in the lower country this past year, We moved folks from the upstate to go clear roads from there. Vice versa, when we had a hurricane in the upstate, last year was kind of a wacky year for us. We had moved personnel from the lower part of the state to work in the upstate. I think it's important, particularly, to have like employees compensated likewise. So I know that there's market disparities within the state, but at the same time, I think it's important that a guy from Abbeville is going to talk to somebody from Charleston County, and there often turns into a comparison game. And so that's important that we recognize my workforce across the board the same way.
And to go up to the next level of employee, I mean, from the engineers, is there a lot of turnover and poaching happening in that upper level?
You know, I mean,
that's of concern. If it's not of concern, you don't have to.
What I would say is, I mean, could we always compensate better? Absolutely. I mean, we're in government, so there is, you're not going to make as much money in government as you would in the private sector. Now, there are trade-offs. There's benefits package is typically better in the government, and stability is typically higher. So that those trade-offs are there, and the work-life balance tends to be better in the government side. I would say I need to dig into it a little bit, but I have not seen major increases. But what I would say is we're always under competitive pressure, whether it's from the private sector. I usually don't lose folks to other state agencies unless they just want a lifestyle change. But you do have that movement of folks in and out from the consulting engineering firms.
And my last question for now, just so that it's on the record, and you and I have talked about this a couple times, and many of us in the room have talked about it together as well. You know that I represent Berkeley County, and when I'm at the COG meeting, and our good friend is there oftentimes hearing the complaint from my county supervisor on how Berkeley County feels like they're being penalized by having that 1 cent sales tax for. Tell us, how can we create some type of, if it's revisiting the act that we need to do, or what tool items are in our toolbox, tools are in our toolbox to incentivize the counties who actually get these referendums across the finish line for these critical infrastructure projects that could enhance them to maybe even entice others to want to duplicate some of those successes that would be beneficial to all concerned? How do we motivate more people to do it and change the culture for those who are doing it who feel like they're being penalized?
Well, I guess what I would first argue is that when we assign dollars to projects, whether you have a sales tax is not in the consideration of it. So when it comes to the allocation of paving dollars, we had a whole discussion in the last committee about this, but it's based on lane miles. So if you have a sales tax program and you're putting in money to paving projects, then all that means is DOT gets to move a little bit further down the list to work on the next project if you're working on that. Safety dollars are allocated based on deaths. You know, it is where crashes and fatalities are occurring. It's a data-driven activity. Bridge funding is allocated based on the condition of the bridges and where the bridges are. Our MPO and COG dollars are allocated based on population. So a fast-growing community will get, once the census has been updated, it's been allocated based on that. So what I would say is, I've heard that from Berkeley County. What I would argue is that they're treated no differently than other counties in the state. And again, they have taken initiative to do a sales tax, which allows basically to deal with congestion projects that if we waited for the NPO and COG program to happen, probably wouldn't happen in any time frame because they were able to bring those dollars. Again, Horry County, Charleston County, Spartanburg County have all gone down that path as well. I think it's really a judgment call of the General Assembly if we want to incentivize local option sales tax referendums. And again, when DOT gets asked, you know, when we have a local government considering a referendum, we will provide technical advice, but we stay very clear about not being for or against. So I think it would have to have some General Assembly direction, and again, I'd say an appropriation or something like that that would incentivize that process. But we recognize that that's a local decision by the local voters of whether they choose to do so or not.
Thank you. Yeah, every road that's been built in Horry County over about the last 30 years has been built on the penny sales tax. Horry County just passed the RIDE 4, so our fourth penny over the last 30-ish years or so, and 22, 31, several different widenings all over the county. So it's been super beneficial for our area. And great question, Representative Smith, on the employee retention. And salaries, we have really worked hard, not just at DOT, but on Ways and Means, on all of our different agencies across the board, to really bring those salaries into range where they need to be competitive for our state workers. Questions, more questions? Representative Bowers.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Director, for you really have a wealth of information, and we appreciate it. So on your slide 11, I think it is, you show 1 point. I'm afraid to go too fast. I'll miss it. For the maintenance budget.
Yes, sir.
1.387 billion. I understand that, but you also mentioned something. I think it's kind of new. It was put in with the gas tax, the gas tax trust fund. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So, and it's dedicated to maintenance as well, right?
So basically that was, and that you can find it on our website. It's highly transparent, but it's basically all the dollars that came into DOT from the last major roads bill, Act 40, back in 2017. One of the requirements is that basically all of the new revenue that we generated gets segmented and set aside basically away from the rest of the highway fund. So it's its own accounting from there. You can go on our website. It goes down to the projects in Pickens County. What I would say is that those dollars have been exclusively put towards projects and disaster recovery, our debris cleanup contracts, because we could put that towards maintenance. But we don't, that's how we pay for paving, basically, at the end of the day. It does not pay for payroll or salaries of our maintenance employees.
Right, the 184, the 184, 184 million for mowing contracts, asphalt.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I understand that. I just don't know where the 389 goes on a day-to-day basis.
So 389 million. So the Infrastructure Maintenance Trust Fund brings in, I can pull up the sheet here, but it gets funding from the gas tax, that 389 million in there. It also gets all of the car sales tax revenue, which is about $280 to $300 million. It gets the EV fees. It gets in all that. All of that has been put into that fund and has been basically dedicated only towards paving projects, a little bit of interstates, a little bit of bridges, but it goes almost exclusively to paving projects and resurfacing projects across the state. Okay. I might be able to pull it up.
Maybe we need to do a sidebar, but it looks like to me that we have 1.7 billion total for maintenance.
No, sir. It's 1.3. That okay. 389 with all the other funds is put into the is put into the total budget because we are. Let me pull this back up. I'm sorry. Shouldn't try to. We have another chart when we go with the Ways and Means Committee, and we can provide that to you, but we actually isolate out what's specifically to the Infrastructure Maintenance Trust Fund. But when we pull together all of our sources of funding together into one pie, it's 1.3 billion into maintenance activities, and that's inclusive of bridge replacements and repairs, our paving contracts, and then what our field maintenance personnel are doing in each one of our districts and counties.
Yeah, where I was going with that, I know it's not your fault, but it seems like we make this mighty complicated. And so apparently we set up the trust fund when we raised it, when the gas tax was raised, right? So why is that? Why is that 389 million kind of, set aside, and it's not? Why is it just not put in maintenance? Because it's being used for maintenance. I guess that's my question. Maybe a better question for Ms. Chairlady.
I'll try my best. Mr. Simrell was the chairman of that committee and authored that piece of legislation. And at the time, the concern was that if we did not put it into, and we called it back then a lockbox.
A lockbox. That's a good.
A lockbox of specific what's existing, no new roads, just existing maintenance, that those dollars would be put in that lockbox because there was a lot of concern about raising the level of the tax and making sure those dollars went for exactly what they were supposed to go for. So they were not commingled. They were put right there so that you could follow that penny the way DOT has followed that penny to see what they actually pay for. And the promise being kept that we would maintain the roads that we had without anything new being added with those funds. That was the reason that it was locked up, separate. It was a tremendous amount of existing angst about funding potentially being pulled in different directions.
So I guess, can I go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the concern was they might take that 389 million and go build a new road in Berkeley County or somewhere.
Exactly. And we, if you could turn back the clock and have the feeling of the General Assembly back then, you would have known that while right now we're dealing with congestion and growth, back then, truly, the deferred maintenance was eating us all alive. And that was the catch-up mode, the mindset of what we were asked and tasked to do to get us to where we are now. Honestly, if we hadn't done that, we'd be doing that now and on top of it. So at least we're moving forward in the right direction. But we had not done any focus on the maintenance piece of it. We'd never even started talking about the bridge problems. We wouldn't have, none of that would have come up. It was also restructuring because DOT in many, many states, and South Carolina was not an unusual situation for many years, was very parochial in whoever held the seniority in the whatever the local governments were and the state governments were, saw their roads get attention and other roads didn't. And we also developed that three-legged stool that hopefully now the commission will update with the new pieces that we are prioritizing. So it was a bigger picture of, okay, let's get out of the dark ages. Let's start looking at what we need in fixing the deficient repairs and maintenance and moving forward with a responsible plan forward, which this seems to be the next step in that responsible plan forward. Does that help a little bit?
And let me just add, to kind of piggyback off of that, having served on that committee as well, there are two things. We worked to kind of restructure, reform, and depoliticize the system, DOT, and also it was kind of a take care of what you have before you build more. And the real concern being, existing roads, not building new roads, but taking care of what we have and catching up on all of that deferred maintenance before we expand. And again, as the chair lady said, we had different challenges back then than we do now. So it was a much different discussion.
So this may be a stupid question, pardon me, but so the objective of this 389, that the gas tax increase at that time was all put in the lockbox. Is that right? So the gas tax
the increase section, not the base that already existed, but any increase. All right,
Okay,
the increased piece of it, we made a promise to the people. We took testimony during that time, and we'd have folks saying, "My neighborhood has not been paved in 20 years, but you just took care of a neighborhood, brand new one right down the street, and that's not fair. And so the answer to that was, okay, let's fix that. Let's dedicate this increase that we're asking you citizens to pay when you're using our roads. And by the way, at the time, it was close to 40% paid from out-of-state visitors, I believe. So that's also a nice deal for our citizens in that, we do have a heavy tourist situation, helping us pay for the roads. But we made a promise that increased section, so it's not every penny of the gas tax. So that's why you see the different pieces. Does that start to put the puzzle together a little bit?
The puzzle is coming together. It's just my OCD. It just looks maintenance in two separate buckets just didn't.
It is, but the promise there was, because there was so much heartburn, South Carolina had been tied to having the lowest gas tax of anybody, and that had been one of the just blocks of our plan always. And when we realized that we could not do the work that needed to be done any other way, we had to come up with a plan that satisfied the concerns of our citizens first, and then of the General Assembly to make it as fair as possible. And that's how it rolled out.
You're going to use it for something else, basically.
There was fear about raising a tax somewhere, yes, and it not going for what it was intended to go for. And so that lockbox is, that's just what we called it. Yeah. But that section, that increase was dedicated to getting us caught up. And that's what DOT has. They have laser focused with those dollars on those things. That's why this is a brand new penny chart that we have today. This is one I hadn't seen before. But they started with that penny piece early on showing us where the penny, how many iterations do you have, Secretary?
Several.
Because they brought it back to us year after year after year, showing us what work and how we're actually moving that needle, so that they're being accountable to us. And when I believe you mentioned that your website has all of that in detail, you can go back and look at specifically that, because transparency was one of the requirements of doing it.
Thank you. I'm sorry I drag you through all that. But, so the last thing I have, I understand now. So the Mr. Director, I've heard a lot of folks say in this building and other places that the 3.99 cents that we send to CTCs.
Yes, sir.
That we need to send more money to CTCs. Do you have an opinion you're willing to share on that?
So to what Representative Co-Chair Erickson was saying, part of that 12-cent increase was to also increase the allocation that had been made towards the County Transportation Committee. So it had been at 2.66 cents. The 12 cents, so that's, if you add it together, we're getting to the 12-cent increase here. But the 1.33 cents of the CTC program is from there. The CTC program has been on the books since the 1940s and was kind of rehauled in the 1990s when basically the delegations were, the respective county delegations used to pick the projects. Then it was delegated to a county committee, and then some delegations have elected to give that to their county councils. So in Berkeley, Dorchester, Lexington counties, I'm aware of the county councils, either the county council is the body or it's from there. What I would say about CTCs is there are 46 different, there's 46 counties, there are 46 different CTCs, and they operate all very differently in how they operate. They can be an effective way of dealing with things that don't neatly fall into our prioritization process, that if we have a road that is not triggering in our prioritization process, the CTC can do it. It can be also a tool for dealing with, local funding. There's a lot of local governments in the state that is the road funding that they are depending upon for their local networks. So how it operates, I think there are questions to that. I guess what I would argue is a decision to put more money into the CTCs. More money in the CTCs means more road work across the state. So I think that's good. What I would caution the committee to think about is carving money out of the DOT to give it to the CTCs is a very bad idea, because what you will do is start all the measures that we've made progress on, we will start going backwards. So what I would say is, there's a dire desire to put new money into the CTCs. That's a General Assembly decision. Again, I think there's no bad road work that can be done out of this. But at the same time, I would be very, very concerned about taking money out of the DOT to give it to the CTCs, because that will set back on a lot of the things that we are trying to accomplish across statewide.
I've heard it's the pie is still the same size. You just move it around a little differently, but it sounds like
And
I got your drift.
Yeah, and no, and CTCs are not subject to the same ranking and prioritization and analytical requirements that the DOT is required to follow.
That it? Super. Next up, you ready? Born ready, Mr. Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good to see you, Secretary Powell. We hadn't talked in 30 minutes or so.
Well, like 2 hours, sir, but that's all right.
Feels like 30 minutes. Couple questions when it comes in funding, and we're going to talk about a couple different things here, if you're okay with that. First off, when we get to electric vehicles, currently, right now, if an electric vehicle is charging at, say, like a Spinks gas station or something like that, are we collecting any money that goes towards road funding from those vehicles?
So, no. Right now, there is sales tax incurred on those transactions that goes. I've asked DOR if there's a way for us to ascertain what that might be. We don't know, but it goes directly into the general fund. So it does not go into roads and highways. We've calculated, if you were to do a per kilowatt hour charge, which is kind of the basis for that, it'd be about 4.5 cents to be equal to what what a gas, it's similar fill up, for lack of a better term, a charge versus a fill up. If you're at the Buc-ee's trying to charge your vehicle, whether regardless of being agnostic of what it would be, it's about 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Georgia and a number of other states do have those type of fees on their books to capture the transient population that's passing through your state that is using a charger, because a registration fee only captures your residents that are charging usually at home at night, and not necessarily the person going from New York to Disney World and stopping at that Buc-ee's and making a charge there.
So
and using South Carolina roads.
Do we have that technology available to collect that money?
So I think it would be, I think it'd be a discussion with DOR, but I think it would be a requirement for their sales tax that they have to collect that and how they report that back. But again, would probably have and I would defer to DOR on that, but they would probably have to have a startup period for getting that collection done.
I think it might benefit this committee to look at whatever Georgia or some of these other groups are doing, to maybe look at some of that language to maybe add to it, and makes it fair. And again, it captures that tourism dollar that's coming through. It's not South Carolinians paying for it. It's back to what we were looking at, the other stuff. Might be something we want to take a look at. Another thing. So you and I briefly spoke about this, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And you're going to have to help guide me through this some a little bit. But when contractors are building roads in this state, they are buying sand, they are buying rock aggregate, they're buying certain things to build these roads, and they're passing that charge on down to you, and included in them buying that is a sales tax that they're buying. So you're paying for their sales tax that's going into our general fund. So basically, it's kind of a double whammy. Do you understand what I'm saying? Have we looked at being able to exempt them from the sales tax stuff, so that way you're not getting hit with that, basically having to pay for what you're contributing to the rest of the state?
I mean, I don't know if we've ever had that conversation. Obviously, there's the general attitude in the General Assembly's been to move away from exemptions. I mean, you could look at it that way, of an exemption on the DOR form. Again, I defer to them. They're the collector on that stuff. Your other option could be that those sales taxes come back into the department to be fed for additional road projects since it's related to transportation-related infrastructure.
See what I'm saying? So they're basically charging the DOT for them to pay back into the general fund.
Yeah. Let's discuss that, but
Yep.
try to move away from exemptions.
Right.
But I believe what the secretary just was saying was there are many times that there's a pass-through type of situation. So let's discuss where those funds are going and what they're being used for right now.
Yep.
And seeing what we would impact if they were to move into another area.
Yeah,
Let's look at that.
That's kind of where I was going with that is that money should probably stay with the DOT if they're being charged it to start with.
And let's just make sure. I just don't want to squeeze a balloon and have it hurt something else over here.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
Definitely worth looking at.
Thank you. And actually, that's all I have for right now. Yeah, see, I was pretty quick on that one. No, we got some discussion to talk about once we get to discussion, yeah.
Fair enough. Any other questions for the secretary? All right. Thank you so much. Member discussion, this is your time. You've been very patient and over the last few months, listened to a lot of public input and stakeholders and DOT. So I know you've had a chance to ask your questions today of Dr. Von Nessen and the secretary, but any discussion, further discussion, questions, specific language, ideas, suggestions that you want to be heard on, now's the time. Representative Brewer.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Who would have thought that I wanted to say something? So, sales tax referendums, and you heard me beat this into the ground, but it's something we have to talk about, right? They collect hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and they are spending 60 to 70% of that money on state roads. That's taking a big burden off of our DOT. And to me, I think we have to incentivize these sales tax programs to continue. We have to incentivize other counties to join into these sales tax programs and kind of thank them for the work that we're doing, that they're doing. I know there's multiple ways to look at this. I've had people say, hey, don't charge us for reviews when the state sends us. When we send the state stuff, don't charge us for reviews. Well, that's peanuts at the end of the day. That's not really an incentive to have a sales tax program. I think if we had an increment, if you're spending $25 million annually on a state road, you should be able to get some sort of incentive from us, from the state, an extra $5 million to thank you for spending this amount of money on our state roads. This goes either to your CTC or back into your program or whatever you want the county to go, as long as it's spent on roads, to be able to spend back into roads, and do it in an incremental level. Do it at something where if you're spending 25, this is the number. If you're spending 35, this is the number. Or 50, this is the number. This is something to incentivize these folks to continue to spend money on state roads and hopefully get those counties that are on the edge of looking at passing sales tax referendums a carrot to add to their $5 million may not build an interchange, but it'll repave some roads. It'll repave dirt roads for them. It will help them resurface some roads. It will help build interchange, turn lanes, roundabouts, different stuff in high congestion areas that can help move traffic through. And it's good money to put after it. And I think it's something we should discuss and being able to reward these counties for helping us on our state roads.
So like a match, it's kind of what you...
A match program, correct.
Right, to incentivize them. So, those referendums fail probably more than they pass. Again, the Horry County has passed 4 pennies over the last 30 years or so, and it's been very successful, and people see... they see the product, they're writing on it, and so they continue to support it because they see it's been very successful. It has not passed probably more. I don't know the numbers right off the top, but a lot of them have failed. Right. They become very political sometimes, well, often. And I don't think that DOT can be involved in that process as far as helping to pass it.
Correct.
Perhaps there's a way to kind of work. We've talked about incentivizing CTCs or different counties that help with state roads, and maybe like you suggested, the match. Let's talk about that and work to see what that might look like and some suggestions on that. So if you've got some specific language, please get with staff. Let's work to develop that and
Sounds
talk
good.
about that some.
Thank you.
Representative Chapman.
So I want to go back and touch on the EVs. Obviously, I have a couple and I have a variety of cars, but I've been a proponent of looking at exactly what Rep. Brewer said, is that right now, if a person drives from North Carolina to Georgia, drives through our state and stops at one of the charging stations, other than the energy cost increase or the energy tax, there's no revenue garnered. And then from that, though, they're effectively using the road for free. As if you also live in the state, you pay that $60, which I think it could increase. Now, if you charge at home versus charging at a superstar station, it's about double. So you pay, whatever your kilowatt is at your home versus you pay typically around double to go to that. So, but if you live in an apartment, you're always charging at a supercharger or a charging station. So other than the fee that we're collecting right now, that's 100% revenue that we're losing. And any we collect from that, it is a plus to the monies that we need to try to garner to increase our budget for the DOT. And I don't know what that amount is, but I think it's gonna increase over years as EVs become more popular, and in some cases, I think especially commuters, that's where it usually becomes very popular. But I think that's a strong suit that we need to try to really focus on, because that's just lost revenue. It's kind of like lost rent, so.
You're right, and good point. I think we implemented that back in 2015, and I believe it was 2015, and we had some discussions on the Transportation Committee back then. I think that's when our Transportation Committee started in 15, and then we were able to get some reform and stuff passed in 17. Discussions that we've had and looking to some other states, and yes, good point, and we're looking at that. The need to, if you've got any specific language or suggestions, again, I will say that for everyone, for our members, for our stakeholders, we have asked by this Friday, please get to Mills and Emma specific language, ideas. It is our hope that by next week we have at least some kind of working doc. It won't be a bill. It will be some suggestions, things that we've identified over the course of this process, potential solutions. And so we need that specific language so that we can start and staff can get this into a bill form, so that when we come back in January the 13th is our first day of session. We will meet that afternoon again. And again, it is our hope by then we have a bill that we can get to you in plenty of time to review, look over, and we will come back January 13th to discuss that and what that product looks like and tweak it, finalize it, take suggestions, and then we will reconvene and meet again Thursday, January the 15th after session. So put those 2 dates on your calendar. I know that staff's already emailed them out to you, but again, any specific language, ideas, suggestions, we need to get those in. Representative Smith, go ahead, and then.
Thank you. Two other quick things, in looking at some of the notes here from some of the previous meetings, we talked about the fast pass lane. I'm drawing a blank here on the express lane. That wasn't the word. What was it called? Choice lane. Yeah, choice lane. I just want to make sure that was on the record, and we talked about that during this discussion to explore that as a possibility for additional revenue and folks being able to opt in who want to opt in, and it doesn't penalize anyone who doesn't want to opt in. It allows folks to opt in and do that. And the other thing, just to quickly capture this, it was talked about as well, the PPPs, the public-private partnerships. I just would want to make sure that while we're exploring if that's going to be part of this doing, that we do learn from our neighboring states some of the issues that they had from learning curves on those. Specifically, Texas comes to mind. They in 2020, no more than 2 years into that, they retracted some of their findings they did. So we have that as well. Yep. And then the Pennsylvania issue as well. Yep. So we got those. So just so we're capturing all those. So we have those.
Yeah, I think.
Perfect. So again, just so that's on the record as well.
Yes.
Yep.
And we will, I think all of this has been sent to the committee, but this is new information that we've received today. We will make sure goes out to all committee members as
perfect.
well.
So again,
for
yeah,
everyone
so
to
just so
look
we're
at, and
capturing all that.
we
Perfect.
are looking into that. Yes. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll touch on a few of the things that we talked about today, and I'm glad that we've got the other subcommittees that are looking at kind of the organizational aspects of things. I don't think we can just throw money at it, obviously, but funding's got to be part of the equation. And I think everybody would agree that we've seen a lot of progress when it comes to paving, and congestion has become the real problem today over the last couple of years. And, you know, the people who have been here for a number of years or even their whole life, they're not the ones that are creating the congestion problems. It's all of our new people that are coming here, which we want to welcome them here. But we've got to figure out a way that we can get an extra contribution from new movers or even those that are, you know, coming to visit the state for tourism, whether that's a registration fee increase, whether that's something that's tied to development like the congestion mitigation fee. We've got to figure out a better way that growth can pay for itself as it relates to our roads. When it comes to tolls, I'm excited about that potential because I imagine this would be, you know, certainly used maybe in the coastal tourist areas or even in some of the urban areas, I guess, because I don't want my constituents to be burdened with building all these expensive roads at the coast that they're never really going to see. No disrespect to any of our colleagues that are from the coastal areas. I'm sure they'll come visit. They'll pay the toll while they're down there. But you know, we certainly have plenty of people coming here from Ohio and everywhere else to come visit our beautiful beaches. And then when it comes to the EV fees, you know, that's not a matter of sticking it to EVs, but we've got to increase the EV fees just so we've got some parity with people that are driving combustible engines, and then we've got a comparable baseline for for EV drivers. So that's just kind of some of the few things that I kind of gathered from today that I wanted to share with the committee. Thank you.
Great points. Thank you. Representative Bowers.
Thank you. Some more history for me to help me understand better. I read somewhere that when you know, we're on a path to put $1 billion of non-recurring funds toward bridges. I think we've got 400 million. We're going to do that for 3 more years. $1 billion. I read somewhere that when all that started, that $1 billion was going to fix all our bridges. Is that true or not? That was going to get the what do you call them, derated bridges?
Mr. Secretary, we're going to let
I
him
don't
handle
remember a number at that particular time,
think
but
that
That's
was
probably
the
a good
number.
thing that you've forgotten that.
I think it would be deferred maintenance in general, but let's.
It was a targeted number of bridges
Kinda
that
where
we had.
that
but-
numbers come from was former Secretary Hall, when she was kind of making her initial pitch for it, was kind of $1 billion to start that program. I'll just be honest, I've never communicated that we're done with $1 billion. I guess what I would say is I think we've recognized the severity of the problem we have with bridges. Again, your district is, you and I have spent some time, multiple times on bridges up there. I believe that we need to be putting at least $400 million, if not more, per year into bridges to start tackling this issue. And I think what we've seen is the industry's responded. We have 10 to 12 companies putting in when we have a letting. We have competition. We've been seeing new firms entering and winning bids on that. So I know that the capacity is there to do it. But I've been very clear, at least since I've become secretary, that we've got to have recurring, continuous funding going into bridge investment, just because to deal with that issue, because it's a South Carolina issue, but it's a national issue, and we're all digging out of this issue. And I think if we want to have our number closer to like what we saw on the map that Mr. Rainwater put up over the other day, of being more like Georgia as opposed to being like North Carolina, it's going to require continued investment going forward.
And let me say too, so when I became chair of the Transportation Subcommittee a couple years ago, and we started talking about bridges and accelerating the bridge program, I think it was really more of a targeted number of bridges. And we know that a lot of those bridges built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s all at the same time were about to age out at the same time, or we're getting ready to. And so the $1 billion was kind of the start to accelerate the fixing of the bridge program. And the plan was the $200 million a year for 5 years to help address that. So more than like a number, and I'll say too, $1 billion went a lot further 2 years ago even than it does today. We've seen the increase in everything, and particularly our infrastructure needs. So it was really a focus of the targeted, like a number of bridges more so than like a definite number that would fix all the bridges or address the problem.
And just for context too, I mean, a lot of bridges in your neck of the woods are put in the $5 million range to replace. The Lake Marion bridges, which we're getting underway with right now, that is well north of $450 million that we are going to have to spend to replace those bridges soon. So that's just two structures in the state. We've got mega bridge issues that we're working through. The Great PD Bridge between Florence and Dillons County, huge, equally big challenge we've got there. The Lake Hartwell bridges are also, those are actually some of the deepest bridges we own. Those are at depths of 150 feet down. Those are going to be challenges. So while we deal with a lot of what I'll call smaller bridges, we also have a large inventory of large bridges that we've got to tackle, that we've been looking to the federal government to help solve. But we will have a bridge challenge continuous, in that will require continued investment going forward.
And since this is, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Since this is a finance kind of meeting, so how did we do that? Did the leadership just decide, okay, we're going to take I know non-recurring is a little bit different than the budget. So how do we get the director his $400 million out of non-recurring? I mean, we have tons of money that we have not designated. So
right, and a lot of needs. And so again, this being just a plan, the $1 billion plan over 5 years was to target and help some of those, to help DOT, to help the department to accelerate that bridge program.
So will this committee do we have I guess we have the latitude to do whatever we want to. We're lawmakers, right? But do we have the latitude to say, okay, the director's told us he needs $400 million annually for bridges. We've got hundreds of millions in non-recurring funds that are unallocated. So does this committee have the latitude to say, okay, instead of $200 million, we're going to give him his $400 million, and he better fix the bridges?
I'm sure he would take it.
So is that something we want to consider in this committee, or no?
Well, I would tell you, Mr. Bowers, that recommendations from this committee are going to be something that we talk about. But for us to specifically tell Ways and Means that they have to do X, Y, or Z probably isn't going to be what I'm going to suggest that the committee, I think suggestions.
Right.
But actual numbers and how they move their dollars. And remember that we cannot commit one General Assembly to the next year. Okay, so we can only commit 1 year at the time. And in that regard, I think that we have some latitude, yes, to make some recommendations of how that happens. And I think that's come about in other budget. It started when I, when I moved to Education and Public Works was when I left the Transportation and Regulatory Budget Subcommittee. So we got a lot of years on that committee with the two of us and the road issues. We've seen through Secretary Hall and now Secretary Powell how they have worked on the program, making really great headway. We need to continue that and build upon it.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of good things going on. No.
We do. We're making good headway. But here's what I was going to say is just like Co-Chair Crawford said, in just a couple of years ago, that $1 billion was way more than it is right now. So I think one of the recommendations that we need to make as a committee, perhaps, is to say, let's make as much of a dent in this situation as we can faster, because it's costing us more in the long run. And we know all of these bridges exist. They're starting to fail. We're seeing more and more, and that affects commerce and cost. So I think that we could make the case, but I think it's a multi-level request as well.
One final thing, change the subject slightly. The map that we saw earlier that showed the traffic, the red and the orange, is it here? No, the one in the previous meeting that showed, I don't think we have it now. No, the travel map. It was in. But anyway, Representative Robbins made a good point. The way that we designate money, why does the money follow the red on that map? Is that kind of way to put it?
Well,
So and then you can talk. Let me say this one other thing, if you don't mind. So if we do something with the CTC money, we already know the pie is so big, and the pie may not get any bigger. We don't want to take anything away from what's being done with DOT, but we may want to adjust the CTC to where the CTC funds follow the red on that map. Is that something we can do? Okay, now go ahead.
My constituents would love that. I'll let Secretary Powell. Would you speak to that again? You did a good job this morning, kind of explaining that, the history of that, and why that changed.
Yeah, and one thing.
You're the only one that.
There we go. So one thing that I'm going to get prepared for the committee after this meeting, when we kind of were in our break, was pulling the pavement conditions by county in the state. So what that chart was the vehicles miles traveled, the increase in that. So that's just the number of cars kind of passing over based on our traffic counts. What I'm going to get to the committee is actually a per county basis of the road conditions. So when I say that we're 40% good in the state on our primary network, which is something we're working to close the gap on, that 40% good is the average across the state. So when you look at it, certain counties are in better shape than others. Some of those are because they've had sales tax programs. Some of it is just climate. You know, it does not snow in Beaufort County. It did this past year, but it doesn't. So you don't have the same wear and tear that you have in Oconee County in terms of the snow and ice that happen up there. So I'll provide that to the committee just for reference, just so you can see it, in terms of how the whole state's pavement conditions are, because that's really how we assign when we make a determination to take a road for pavement is based on our pavement quality index. So we have vans that drive every road in the state every few years, basically have lasers and sensors in the back of them that go and say how cracked the road is, how rough the road is, and that becomes the basis for when we give it to our districts to say, all right, of the 150 bad roads in the county, rank out that based on traffic conditions, based on truck traffic. That's how they come up with that determination from there, and that information is there. But I would say it's not consistent across the state. The state is not 40% good in every county. There are some counties that are 60% good, and there's some counties that are 30% good, and it averages out.
Thank you. Representative Smith?
Thank you. My folder is closed, so I am at the end of all of my questions. I just want to make sure, because shame on me for making one assumption, and I know that it had to happen during this portion of the other committee meetings, and I apologize. I had to go testify in front of LLR, and I missed this portion of the other meeting. But since it's been brought up 1,600 times at all of our 500 meetings already, the South Carolina is very interested in being the 9th state in the country to bring back that NEPA process. It wasn't discussed in the finance portion. I understand but it was discussed at the other meeting in terms of the wrap up that would be an integral part of this bill as well, right? Just want to check that box while I'm closing my folder. Beautiful. Thank you so very much. And Representative Brewer, my name is Mark Smith, and I approve this message.
Any further discussions, questions? With that, then we will bring our subcommittee meetings to an end. Oh, I do want to say while I'm thinking about it, there were a pair of glasses that were left on the first floor yesterday during our full committee meeting yesterday. So it was a pair of glasses left. If anyone left their glasses, we'll leave them in Ways and Means, and anybody wants to claim their glasses, that's where they will be. And so with that, again, a reminder, this is your opportunity. Any specific language you have, please get to staff before the end of the week. And hopefully over probably next week, we will have some concepts to you, a working doc to review, and then hopefully shortly thereafter, something in bill form. And again, we will meet on it will be a draft. Yes, it will be a draft for us to consider and take up when we meet again, January the 13th and January the 15th, our first week back in session. So this is your opportunity. This is your time to give us any and all specific language for consideration. And for any of our stakeholders or anyone listening that wants to submit potential language, public input, what have you, you can send that to schouseepw@schouse.gov. And all right. Again, thank you all so much for all of your hard work over the last few months. We're not done yet. We've still got a lot of work to do. Now we've got a product that we need to produce. So get that information in, and we appreciate it. Hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas. Hope you get some time off, spend with your families, have a good break, and we will see you in January. Thank you.